Here's the thing about vocabulary questions on the SAT. They're not testing whether you know big words. They're testing whether you can read carefully. Every answer is hiding somewhere in the passage. You just have to know where to look. And today, I'm going to show you exactly where. These words in context questions make up about 6 to 8 questions per module. That's more than any other single type. Master this, and you're picking up easy points every time. Let's break down the 3 strategies that'll get you through every single one. Strategy 1. Plug and play. Read the sentence with each choice plugged into the blank. Does it match the tone and meaning of the surrounding text? If the passage describes something negative, the blank can't be positive. If the passage is about growth, the blank can't mean decline. Let me give you a quick example. If a passage says a reaction was jarring and uncomfortable, and the choices are inspiring, unsettling, predictable, and creative, you know the answer has to match that negative tone. Unsettling is the only one that works. Strategy 2, look after the blank. The sentence after the blank often defines exactly what the blank means. The SAT loves to put a definition or explanation right next to the word it's testing. If the next sentence says, they stabilize soil and support pollinators, the blank probably means something about being useful or beneficial. Strategy 3, spot the contrast. Words like instead, however, but, and rather tell you the blank is the opposite of what comes next. If the passage says not but rather the result of careful planning, the blank must mean spontaneous or unplanned. This is the most powerful strategy on the test, and it shows up constantly. Now, 3 traps to watch for. 1. The theme trap. A word that relates to the passage's topic but doesn't fit the specific sentence. Just because a passage is about music doesn't mean harmonious is the answer. 2. The gut feeling trap. Picking the first word that sounds right without checking all 4. Always test every choice. The SAT designs distractors to sound tempting. 3. The wrong fit trap. A word that has the right general meaning but doesn't work grammatically or logically in the specific sentence. A word can mean roughly the right thing and still be wrong. 3 strategies. Plug and play, look after the blank, and spot the contrast. Let's put them to work. Let's start with a straightforward one. This passage is about Thelonious Monk, a jazz pianist from the 1940s. It says his approach was blank, and then gives us the clues. Angular melodies, jarring dissonances, and his music clashed with mainstream jazz. Those clues are all pointing one direction, something uncomfortable, something that didn't sit well with audiences. A says unsettling. That means causing unease or discomfort. Angular, jarring, clashing, yeah, that fits perfectly. B says entertaining, that's positive, but the passage describes discomfort, not enjoyment. Eliminated. C says predictable. If Monk's music clashed with what people expected, it was the opposite of predictable. Out. D says inspiring. Also positive. Nothing in the passage suggests listeners felt inspired. They felt uncomfortable. The answer is A, unsettling. This is strategy 1 in action. The tone clues in the passage all pointed to negative and uncomfortable. Only one choice matched. This one's about invasive plant species. Ecologist Raj Patel argues they shouldn't be blank dismissed and then explains why. Some non-native plants actually stabilize soil, support pollinators, and fill ecological roles. So Patel's saying we shouldn't dismiss all invasive species without exception, because some are actually helpful. What kind of dismissal is he arguing against? Says quickly. That would mean the problem is about speed. We're rejecting them too fast. But Patel's argument isn't about speed. He's saying the blanket rejection itself is wrong. B says publicly. That's about whether the dismissal happens in public or private, totally irrelevant to Patel's argument about ecological nuance. C says categorically. That means without exception, absolutely across the board. That fits perfectly. Patel is saying we shouldn't dismiss every invasive species without considering that some are helpful. D says accidentally. You don't accidentally dismiss something. That doesn't make logical sense. The answer is C, categorically. Strategy 2 applies here, what came after the blank defined it. The examples of beneficial invasive species told us the issue was about blanket rejection. Those were warm-ups. Now let's see where it gets tricky. This passage is about how children learn language. It says children do not simply blank the speech patterns of adults. Instead, they actively construct grammatical rules. The proof? Kids say things like goad and mouses, which they could never have heard from adults. The word instead is our signal. Strategy 3, spot the contrast. Whatever goes in the blank must be the opposite of actively construct grammatical rules. A says imitate. To imitate means to copy or reproduce. That's passive copying, the exact opposite of active construction. This fits the contrast perfectly. B says appreciate. The passage isn't about whether kids value adult speech. It's about copying versus creating. Irrelevant. C says interpret. Interpreting means understanding meaning. Kids probably do interpret language, but the contrast requires something about passive copying, not understanding. D says disregard. If kids disregarded adult speech, they'd be ignoring it entirely. But the passage says kids do engage with language. They just don't merely copy it. The answer is A, imitate. The word instead told us everything. Actively construct is the opposite of passively imitate. Art historian Elena Vasquez is describing how Rembrandt's brushwork changed over time. His later self-portraits became increasingly blank, and then the dash gives us the definition. Earlier paintings were precise, carefully blended, while his final works were thick, rough, with visible ridges. This is a before and after contrast. Earlier equals precise and blended. Later equals thick and rough. The blank describes the later quality. It says deliberate. That means intentional and careful. But the later work moved away from careful technique. Deliberate is closer to the before, not the after. B says unrefined. That means lacking polish or finesse. Thick, rough, visible ridges, that's unrefined. Direct match. C says vivid. Vivid means bright or striking. The passage is about texture and technique, not color. You could have vivid and precise brushwork. Vivid doesn't capture the change. D says ambitious. The passage doesn't say anything about the goals or scale of the paintings. It's specifically about physical brushwork quality. The answer is B, unrefined. The M dash set up a contrast between early and late technique. Thick, rough brushwork is unrefined. A new superconductor has been discovered, and there's excitement in the physics community, but independent labs have been unable to blank the original team's results, which is causing doubt. Strategy 2. Look after the blank. The phrase, question whether the findings will hold up under continued scrutiny, tells you the issue is about verification. Labs are trying to confirm whether this discovery is real. A says, challenge. But here's the thing, the inability to do the blank LED 2 questioning. If the blank were challenge, it would be circular, unable to challenge, leading to questioning. That's the same thing twice. B says replicate. In science, to replicate means to reproduce an experiment to confirm it. When labs can't replicate results, they question the findings. That's exactly this passage. C says fund. Funding has nothing to do with whether the results are correct. The passage is about experimental confirmation, not money. D says publish. The results are already known. They generated significant excitement. So publication isn't the issue. The answer is B, replicate. Scientific context matters here. Replicate is the precise term for reproducing experimental results, and the passage is describing a replication failure. Now let's tackle the hard ones. If you can get these right, you're ready for test day. This is a dense one. Historian Keiko Yamamoto argues the 1892 Homestead strike was not a blank eruption of worker frustration, but rather the culmination of decades of strategic organizing. Not X, but rather Y. That's the strongest contrast structure on the SAT. X and Y must be opposites. Y is culmination of decades of strategic organizing. So X must mean sudden, unplanned, spontaneous. A says unprecedented. That means never happened before. Whether the strike was first of its kind has nothing to do with planned versus spontaneous. Wrong dimension entirely. B says inevitable. Tricky one. Saying the strike was not inevitable would mean it was avoidable. But the passage actually says decades of buildup led to it. That suggests it was inevitable. So not inevitable would contradict the passage's own logic. C says impulsive. That means acting without forethought. Not an impulsive eruption, but rather a planned culmination. Impulsive is the perfect opposite of strategic and planned. D says insignificant. Not insignificant would mean it was significant, but that doesn't set up the contrast the passage needs. It's not about importance, it's about planned versus unplanned. The answer is C, impulsive. The not X but rather Y structure tells you everything. Impulsive is the opposite of strategic, decades-long planning. Philosopher Martha Nussbaum argues that literature serves a democratic function. By making readers inhabit different perspectives, novels and stories blank the capacity for empathy that democratic citizenship requires, but that everyday life may fail to cultivate. Key phrase at the end, fail to cultivate. If everyday life fails to grow empathy, literature must succeed at growing it. The blank and cultivate should be near synonyms. A says assess. Assessing means evaluating or measuring. Nussbaum isn't saying literature measures empathy, she's saying it builds it. Assessment is passive, her claim is about active development. B says undermine, that means weaken. Nussbaum calls literature's function essential, that's deeply positive. Undermining empathy would destroy her entire argument. C says foster. To foster means to encourage the development of. That's a near synonym of cultivate. Literature fosters empathy that everyday life fails to cultivate. Perfect parallel. D says regulate. Regulate means to control or maintain. Literature isn't described as controlling empathy like a thermostat. It's described as growing something that wouldn't otherwise develop. The answer is C, foster. The phrase fail to cultivate was your anchor. The blank had to mean essentially the same thing as cultivate. Foster equals cultivate, develop, grow. Last one, and it's tough. Researchers are studying bee population decline. Pesticide effects aren't always immediately apparent. A colony may look healthy, then experience sudden blank in its ability to forage, navigate, and reproduce. The passage ends with catastrophic failure. The blank describes what happens to the colony's abilities. Sudden tells us it's abrupt. Catastrophic failure tells us it's total. We need a word for a sudden, total loss of ability. A says fluctuation. That means going up and down. But this isn't a back and forth pattern. It's a one-way decline from healthy to catastrophic failure. B says collapse. A sudden collapse, a complete, abrupt failure. That matches both sudden and catastrophic failure perfectly. C says expansion. An expansion in ability would be positive growth. The passage is about decline. This is the opposite of what we need. D says plateau. A plateau means leveling off. That contradicts catastrophic failure. A plateau is stable, not catastrophic. The answer is B, collapse. When the passage says catastrophic failure, it's practically defining the blank for you. Match the intensity. Catastrophic failure equals collapse. If you got that one, you're ready for test day. SAT words in context, quick reference. Do, plug each choice into the blank and read the full sentence. Do, look after the blank for definitions and examples. Do, watch for contrast words instead but, rather, however. Don't, pick a word just because it relates to the passage's topic. Don't. Go with your gut. Test all four. Key rule. The answer is always in the context. If you can't find the clue, you haven't read carefully enough. 3 strategies. Plug and play, look after the blank, spot the contrast. Those 3 cover every words in context question on the SAT. That's all 8 examples, from easy to as hard as it gets. If you want more practice, I've got a free PDF with additional questions just like these. Link in the description and pinned comment. If this helped you, drop a like and subscribe. I'm posting new SAT tutorials every week covering every question type. And if any of these tripped you up, leave a comment and I'll break it down further. Good luck on test day. You've got this.